The age of scattered chieftains was coming to an end. For centuries, Viking war bands roamed the seas, built colonies, and carved out power with axe and fire. But now, in the homelands, Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, a new kind of leader was rising, the Viking king. These kings ruled not just by strength, but by law, alliance, and symbolism. They united tribes under banners, claimed divine right through gods or Christ, and wielded diplomacy as sharply as any blade. In Norway, rival jarls were brought to heel under Harald Fairhair, the first true king. In Denmark, power shifted to royal courts, where iron and gold worked together. In Sweden, trade routes and temple towns like Uppsala gave rise to royal families claiming descent from gods. These new monarchs walked a fine line between pagan tradition and Christian influence. Some still honored Odin. Others took baptism to forge alliances with Europe. Thrones replaced longships. Crowns replaced war helms. But the blood of the sea still flowed in their veins. This was the birth of the Norse kingdoms and the dawn of Viking royalty. At first, the Vikings came to raid, then to settle. But in the heart of England, they did something more. They ruled. The eastern and northern lands conquered by Viking armies became known as the Danelaw, not just a region, but a system. Here, Norse kings and jarls enforced their own laws, spoke their own language, and built towns in the image of their homelands. At the center of it all was Jorvik, what the English once called York, a thriving hub of trade, politics, and culture. Silver coins were minted, law councils debated, goods from the Baltic, the North Sea, and the rivers of Rus passed through its markets. Norse rule wasn't just war, it was administration. Anglo-Saxon and Viking customs began to blend. Mixed families, mixed laws, and mixed faiths reshaped the region. The Danelaw became a bridge between invader and native, between pagan and Christian, between old and new. In this Norse-ruled corner of England, a new kind of kingdom took root. Not all Viking journeys led west. Some carved deep into the rivers of the east, into the heart of what would become Russia and Ukraine. Norse traders and warriors known as Varangians traveled the great waterways of Eastern Europe, the Dnieper, the Volga, and beyond. At first they came to trade, furs, slaves, amber, exchanging goods with Slavs, Byzantines, and Arabs, but soon they began to rule. In the late 9th century, a Varangian leader named Rurik established control in Novgorod. His descendants moved south, founding the great city of Kiev. This was the beginning of Kievan Rus, a new realm born from Norse ambition and Slavic soil. Norse warriors became princes. They built forts, issued laws, and protected trade routes that reached Constantinople. Over time, they blended with the Slavic people in blood, culture, and belief. Pagan gods gave way to Orthodox Christianity. Viking names faded, but their legacy remained. From this fusion, a new civilization emerged, one that would shape the future of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. The Vikings didn't just cross oceans, they crossed continents and helped found kingdoms that still exist today. In the sagas, there is a name spoken with awe and fear: Ragnar Lothbrok, a legendary warrior, king, and raider, a man said to have fought dragons, conquered kingdoms, and died in a pit of snakes, laughing at death. History and myth blend in his story, but his legacy lives on through his sons. Ivar the Boneless, brilliant, ruthless, a commander of the great heathen army. Ubba, a fierce warlord, feared in the West. Bjorn Ironside, explorer and conqueror, said to have raided the Mediterranean itself. Together, they did not just raid. They carved kingdoms. They turned vengeance into empire. They carried their father's legend across Europe. Whether Ragnar was man or myth, his sons were very real, and their deeds reshaped the world. For Viking warriors, they were more than heroes. They were a blueprint, a saga made flesh. In the time of Ragnar and his sons, Norway was still divided, a land of fjords, forests, and feuding jarls. But one man would rise to bind them all, Harald Fairhair, a warrior, a king, and a legend. Around the late 800s, Harald set out to conquer every rival chieftain in the land, not for gold, but for unity. With sword and shield, he defeated his enemies. With marriage and alliances, he brought others under his banner. From the rugged coastlines to the inland valleys, Harald forged the first true kingdom of Norway. It is said he swore never to cut his hair until the land was his. And when the wars were done, he cut his golden locks. As the first high king of the north, under his rule, power became centralized. Jarls became vassals. Tribute flowed to a royal court. And though paganism remained strong, his reign opened the door to Christian kingship in the generations that followed. Harald Fairhair didn't just win battles, he made a nation, and in doing so, changed Viking history forever. By the early 11th century, Viking warlords had raided, conquered, and settled far across Europe. But one king would unite it all. His name was Cnut the Great. Born of Danish royal blood, Cnut seized the throne of England in 1016 after years of brutal war. Not long after, he became king of Denmark, then Norway, and briefly ruled parts of Sweden. This was no longer a scattered realm of raiders. It was a North Sea empire, stretching from Scandinavia to the English coast. But Cnut ruled not just with the sword, he ruled with strategy. He embraced Christianity, not as a token, but as a tool of diplomacy. He attended Mass and built churches, even as he honored his Norse roots. His reign brought peace to war-torn lands. Trade flourished. Laws were respected. Enemies were welcomed as allies. Cnut balanced two worlds, Viking and Christian, warrior and king. For a moment, the Vikings ruled like emperors, and Cnut the Great stood at the height of it all. In the twilight of the Viking Age, one last warrior rose, as fierce as the old kings, and more worldly than any before him. His name was Harald Hardrada, a Norse prince, a battle-hardened mercenary, a former commander of the elite Varangian Guard in the glittering empire of Byzantium. In 1046, he returned to Norway, not as a raider, but as a king. His reign was bold, aggressive, and restless. Harald ruled with ambition and still hungered for more. In 1066, he sailed across the North Sea to claim the throne of England. At first, he won, but at Stamford Bridge, English forces met him with surprising speed. Outnumbered and unarmored, Harald led from the front, towering, defiant, a final charge, a final fall. His death marked more than the end of a battle. It ended an era. The Viking Age, once an age of fire, conquest, and kings, was over. What followed would be ruled by crowns, crosses, and nations. But for one last time, a Viking stood against the world. and dared to win it all. By the close of the 11th century, the sound of Viking war horns faded from the shores of Europe. The raids had stopped. The conquests had ended. But the Norse were not gone. They had changed. Kingdoms once ruled by jarls and warlords now bowed to kings, crowned not by the gods, but by bishops. Stone churches rose where sacred groves once stood. Crosses replaced hammers. Christianity swept across Scandinavia through sword, sermon, and marriage. But though the gods were silent, the old world whispered still. Norse law shaped courts. Norse words filled new languages in England, Ireland, and beyond. Norse courage flowed in the veins of knights and kings. Their stories of Odin, of Ragnar, of Leif were written into saga and song. Their ships and bones lie beneath cities they once founded. The Viking Age ended, but its legacy endures in myth, in memory, and in the very foundations of Europe. The fire may have died, but the embers still burn.